Hello, Happy New Year. Welcome back to another Keyframe Coach review. So, I've got a shot here from Mike, another one from Mike. Thank you very much, Mike. How many times can I say Mike? And it's a shot where Mike says, "Thank you for taking the time to review my shot. Just a general body mechanics scene, trying to go for a more stylized video game character intro. Would like you to check my arcs, poses, timing, spacing, etc." So just everything animation. Check everything. Cool. So let's take a look. Nice. Cool. So I had a few thoughts. I've made a few notes as usual. Just going to turn on some tracing paper. So initially, now these aren't like absolutely definitely do these, but I was just thinking that the initial pose, if I just turn that down a little bit, the initial pose just feels a little bit T pose. His feet almost feel as if they're in the position when he first comes in, maybe just turned out a little bit. I felt like maybe you could get just a bit more storytelling in that pose, a bit more kind of anticipation of what's going to happen. So, maybe he's a bit more in one of those like gunslinger poses, ready to draw. Or, he's maybe just in a bit more of a dynamic pose. And you can do that by just kind of having the hips one side. That's just, I guess, an idea. It also kind of helps the clarity of that gun because you see we can kind of get that in a bit more of a better silhouette. There's some poses through here where it kind of lose the clarity a little bit. So just whatever we can do to kind of get that storytelling, because while it's a body mechanics shot, we obviously it's still an acting shot. There's still beats, storytelling beats that need to be in there, and whatever we can do to get our poses to tell that story as best we can is the most ideal situation. Even though it's body mechanics, it still needs to be acting. So I guess just have a think about that, what we could do to kind of push that. I like that he looks down at the gun, kind of tells that story quite well. But what can we do with this initial pose to get that in there? How is he feeling? Has he just walked up to this thing? Where are we at with it? Kind of feels like a body mechanics test right now versus a living character that there's some stakes to it. I know it's just a training dummy, but maybe he just can't get this shot right and this is his 50th time. Just some kind of backstory that you would feel in that initial pose. So yeah, I guess just a bit more dynamic. Could even have him kind of like leaning back, have the gun a bit more out, drawn him a bit too lean back right there. But I don't know, I was just trying to be quick with it and think of something to kind of get a bit more dynamism in that pose. And then for this pose, I feel like he's a little off balance if I just hide this sketch. So he's kind of like leaning back quite a lot, and his weight, if I kind of do like an average of his weight, which I guess is like here. Oh, I guess his weight feels like it's like here. Just feels like you would want that a bit more balanced. So you'd have one there and one there, for example, or do this where you kind of switch it over, which I think is nice because you're stepping forward with this foot. So it'd be nice if that just kind of switched over and he really like did a lunge forward with this also to get that kind of uppercut with the gun. I thought could be nice. There's things which I mention often, like the flow lines through the arms, and also just I guess getting that chest and hip to have that contrappasto feeling where one is this way, one is that way. Contrappasto, I don't know. It felt very posh when I said contrappasto there, but you get the idea. Just kind of adding to the dynamism, adding to the dynamic posing. And then I thought one thing which is missing from both of the gunshots is a bit of an anticipation. So a kind of like aim and then fire. I think that's pretty clear from what I just did. I think it would just add to the clarity. But yeah, I guess if he does a kind of like stuck out gun pose, and then the next pose is the gun kind of like or recoiling back out of that. I guess I just had it come down there. That's just going to give you enough time to read that he's kind of aiming the gun. And then we get that like cell of the gun firing. I guess because it's an uppercut sort of motion, you would have it kind of go maybe away from you. I don't know. But either way, the main note is, I guess, to aim and then fire. Even if it's just for, a few frames, I think just getting that in there is going to help with the beats and reading that. Like if you were firing a gun, you would never, I guess, fire it like mid swing. You would always aim, fire, and it kind of feels like he gets into the pose and fires straight away, and almost like just fires in a way. But even if you were doing that, it would still be nice to get some kind of recoil from that gun. So maybe he's, he can fire it at the peak of that arc and then kind of feel the recoil through that arm and through the body. I guess this is a mechanics note where he's kind of down in this pose, and he might be further down here, his head might be more down here. I just drew a general pose, but how that would work in the scene, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe that would be nice, and then you would be able to get something a little more straight to help with that like poof, compression or poof, or whatever that compression of the arm is. But the more contrast you can get, obviously, the better as well. So if that's further down, anyway, what I was going to say is when he goes through, if I just turn this off, this transition to the next pose, I feel like there's not a lot of up and down in the hips, and you can do a lot of that motion and a lot of that weight transfer by kind of being. So I'll act it out, but I guess he's down in this pose, is doing a kind of lunge, and then he's going to switch to doing a pose where he's facing the other way. So rather than staying in this plane with the hips and kind of trying to do all the mechanics around there, you just come from this and like just jump into the next one. Don't know if you can hear that or hear what I just said because I was further away from the microphone, but hopefully you did. But yeah, if you just get more up down in those hips, it's going to help to make your transitions between poses just feel more alive, feel more weighty, and help the body mechanics a lot. And it's also just easier if you kind of trying to move around, like I said, in that lower plane and not really have a lot of up and down through this area. Then it just means you're going to have to like maneuver the rest of the body around a lot more. Whereas with this, you can kind of just do big pose and then into another pose. But I do like what you're doing with the arms and, kind of using those to help generate the spin and twist of the body, which is really nice. Though I would say in this transition here, where you've got this massive overlap, does kind of feel like because this statue mannequin also moves at the same time and we overlap the silhouettes, kind of feels like he's swiping it versus just doing some kind of mechanical move. And then with this pose, now this one I did spend fair amount of time working out and trying to draw. But essentially, I think there's a few issues with this pose. Um, the first issue is kind of, I feel like these hips are just not rotated enough. They're kind of straight to camera to us. It would be nicer if this pose in general was more three quarters, which would give us a nicer silhouette, for example, on the legs. You know, if this is a bit more like this, or even, you know, like this, for example, it's just a bit clearer than what you have at the moment. You can kind of see all three joints of the legs, especially when you're doing a big dynamic held pose like that. You really want to make sure you're seeing all of those clear kind of joints of the different parts of the leg. So that's kind of where I went with this, where we just rotate him around a bit more and we get these legs more into silhouette. And what that will do as well, the next thing I was thinking of why this isn't quite working as well as the rest of the animation is it feels like his chest is rotated to a point which is not physically possible, especially for a big bulky character like him. He's not going to have a lot of range of motion in his chest and in his shoulders. So if you think about how much you can move your chest, you can kind of move it almost 90 degrees either way compared to your hips, but there is still some connection in the hips. So maybe it's more like 70 degrees of rotation. This kind of feels like he's maybe he's doing that full 70%, but then his shoulder is doing a lot more rotation than it might be as well. And you can just kind of share that rotation, which feels like it's mostly in the chest and shoulder. You can share that through the rest of the body, which is why rotating that hip round, rotating the legs round, and just generally getting that chest round more so that we can see a bit more of the front. It just all feels like it's kind of twisting together and as one versus just the chest and shoulder on its own. I think also part of that, to be fair, is you can really feel that motion purely in the chest through these frames. You can kind of see this area's remaining quite still through those frames. And then the chest is doing a massive amount of motion. Just feels a little bit disconnected right now. So those are a couple of things. I would get this arm a bit more compressed, just so we have that kind of like nice straight against compression. It's like you have total clarity here, and then in here you kind of have a bit more complexity, a bit more, compression, I guess. And then again, his head just feels a little uncomfortable. I think you could, where we see his spine, so you can kind of see the back of his bum there, twisting round. It feels like the neck would connect into the head there, and therefore kind of follow that same kind of twist. Kind of feels like what you have at the moment is, this big line of action, and then the head is kind of going against that. It just feels like it wants to kind of be connected. Maybe there's a slight tilt to it, but how you have it right now just feels a little bit too uncomfortable. And then same thing here where, just delete that. You have that kind of line up and then the recoil of the gun to really feel the weight, feel the power of the gun. And one final thing, I guess, is just to make sure that this training dummy is not in the silhouette of the gun. Having this very clear kind of pose and that clearly in silhouette is just going to be a lot clearer. We're not overlapping the silhouette in any way at this like very crucial moment. This is like a clear, I'm aiming the gun, the dummy is there, this is what I'm aiming at. needs to be super clear. Whatever we can do to help that with the silhouette is going to be great. And then I guess here, this transition to the next pose, which is, I guess, just the final pose. So he's kind of transitioning from this to this. I think you can be a little more simple and direct with this. So if we have this pose where his hips kind of here, and then we have here, it makes sense that something in the middle would be, I guess, here. So we flick between those, up, down. Because what you have right now is, if you look at his head, and I know I kind of just drew about his center of gravity there, but it's all kind of linked. But if you look at the head, by having the center of gravity here, comparison to that headspace is moving all over the screen. So in terms of guiding the eye and being super clear and simple with your body mechanics, it's really kind of going from here to here to here, whereas a much simpler thing would maybe be from here to here to here, if possible, or here to here to here. We're going to have to move our eye a lot less because we always focus on the face. So if we think about how this could maybe be a bit more, potentially chest is here, and then we kind of look at how that might work. We go from this to this to this. You can kind of see that the arc is kind of going from there to there to there. And it's a lot simpler and easy to follow compared to here to here to here. Hopefully that makes sense. I did do some drawings as well. So I felt like here, you're already in this really nice down pose. He's really compressed and he's doing this kind of lunge. I feel like you don't need to go down much more to get to the next. Maybe there's like a very slight down before he starts to go up. But when you start transitioning, it's about going from that down pose into an up pose. So I would start those hips coming up. Oh, sorry, just need a swig of the drink there. I don't talk all day. All I do is animate, and then I do one of these reviews, and then my voice is just like, oh my God, stop. So essentially the red is the pose, and then the green is kind of a correction, like I said, for the hips, so that that headspace doesn't go all the way out. So if the hips are there, maybe the headspace is a bit more here, and we're just a bit more simple with it, with that arc. Now I was thinking what would be nice is after you shoot and go back, be nice to kind of get a nice straight in that arm. And it might just help with some of the kind of disconnection, because at the moment you've got this kind of line through there, and then you've got another one going up there. Now, you could, I'm not exactly sure on what the mechanics of the arms would be, but for some reason, something like that felt like it might work. I think driving down with that hand can kind of help to, swing your body up. I think I drew this way too high, this version, but yeah, I guess this was just about balance. Again, it's just talking about that transition from one pose to the next. I feel like you're getting this leg over a bit too soon, but more importantly than that, we're just over here for a bit too long with our center of mass, and that head is just going to be, going all around and doing this arc. Whereas if we get him more over here, our head again is not doing that much. It's a lot simpler. We're in balance a lot quicker, because we have quite a few frames here where if he put his foot down here, it feels like he wouldn't then have the strength to then lift himself up. So it's just a bit off balance. Whereas if that body was a bit further over, you could believe that he would be able to kind of swing. Oops. He would be able to swing himself into that final position. Honestly, for all of this stuff, it feels like you haven't maybe done reference for it and you're just going into animation. I would 100% film reference for all of these moves. I rarely do anything, even with having years of experience in animation. I rarely do anything unless it's just, you know, super cartoony and just really pose to pose without doing reference. I do reference for everything and I use reference for everything. Even if I'm like, oh, I know how that will work. If you don't use reference, it's just going to feel, especially when you're, you know, starting out with animation, it's just going to feel like the mechanics are not quite there. So there's nothing wrong with using reference at all. I would 100% film reference, especially if you have a background in being physical and being able to act out things like this, then definitely do it. It's going to help so much. And don't feel like that's cheating at all. Like, I use it personally as like all of my planning is done in reference, so that by the time I'm touching my animation, like putting my first pose down, then I have planned out my whole thing. I know exactly how it's going to look. I've done all my reference. I've cut it all so that I know exactly what I'm then going to be animating, and I can then push it further in some ways and have some fun with it here and there. But yeah, it all comes from a basis of animating and of a basis of reference and just really paying attention to when things shift around and the weight and the, like, I'm animating a shot right now where it's a few characters kind of interacting and they're just, I wish I'd filmed more reference of people interacting, and I've just kind of like gone straight ahead with it, and I'm just having to do a lot of work figuring out the mechanics just from like knowledge of mechanics. Whereas if I just had the reference, it would just be there and be so much easier. Anyway, reference ran over. Too long, didn't read. Use reference. It's going to help a lot. And then just one final note. When he does this nice kind of spin around on the thumb or finger, I would just get that into a nice silhouette so that we're super clear on that. At the moment, it's kind of overlapping the body, the rest of the silhouette with the body. And I do like this pose more than the first one, especially. Feels like maybe you could potentially get this leg. Actually, ignore that. Yeah, it's nice. You have, you know, a bit of twist happening, a bit of contrapasto. And I would just tweak the arm so that it has a similar feel to, I guess, the character. You know, it doesn't feel like he would be some kind of dainty gunslinger. It feels, you know, macho and tough. And yeah, I would get that in just a more strong pose versus the fingers out and kind of dainty feel. I would just have that a bit more solid and a bit rounder and a bit more, I don't know, gunslingery. But yeah, anyway, that's about it. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I'm going to try and work on that with these Keyframe Coach videos. But once again, thanks a lot for getting another review through Keyframe Coach. If anyone else is interested in a review, check out Keyframe Coach. My voice is starting to go after just 24 minutes of talking. So thanks a lot. See you in the next one.